And, I want you to give me your book this time next week, and I want to see a couple different practice logs you put in. We talk about just simple things you can put in a practice log, and it doesn't have to be, okay, you have to go buy simulator time at XYZ facility. There's plenty of things that they can do at their house for free. It just is an effort thing. So every week, like, hey, like I want to see a couple logs, and if there's 2 or 3 weeks and there's no logs being written down, well, then the conversation becomes, hey, like, remember when we set these certain goals, right? Like, do you think that our progress right now is on track or not on track? And do we think that we need to add in some practice, or do we keep doing the same thing? Well, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result, right? So, those are probably not going to be the most fun conversations, but I think it's part of your job as a coach to keep your players on track.
Welcome to the Approach Podcast. I'm Mike Quinlan, and today we are talking goals with Jason Tipton. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you for having me again, running it back.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you were really excited about doing something on goals. I am self-admittedly really bad at setting goals for myself. I live by one goal, and that is to not get yelled at by my wife or kids each day. Every day I have the same goal, and it's to not get yelled at.
Did that go well this morning?
I don't remember the last time I achieved that goal. So we're working on it. Every day I just strive to be better.
Well, let's maybe break it down a little and just get yelled at once, not like 3 times a night.
Okay, there you go. I set different goals and make them smaller.
More achievable. Okay. We'll get into that later.
All right, sounds good. Why do you think goals are so essential for golf instruction, but also life in general?
Man, I think it just kind of gives you direction. It's so easy to just kind of get into this space where, you're not exactly sure where you're going, right? And that's a hard space to get out of, and that's where a lot of people kind of fall into, especially like in their golf game. If you just pick up a golf club, you don't really know where you're trying to go with it. You don't have a target score in mind. You pretty much just are like, well, I just want to hit the ball. I think having good goals that are kind of trackable is super important.
I would agree 100%, and I can attest to being lost when you get started. So I was getting started and just completely lost. Like, what am I even supposed to be working on? I feel like I'm on the driving range just hitting a ball at a target, but how does that translate into anything, to better golf? But so how do you go about that? So you have a student, how are you going to get them to set goals? What's your process for that?
Well, I think the first thing is, I have them write it down. And it sounds really cliche, but the idea of like writing things down seems to help. And I don't exactly even know why. I don't know the whole psychology behind that, but I know that when my students write down their goals and they can kind of go back and see what they wrote, they tend to stay on track a little more. So where I start is I have this little book that I'll give, like, especially like the high school kids, or I use the Skillest app, and we can write all their goals down in there, like under their first golf lesson. And we have to talk through it. And some of the goals might be score based. Some of the goals might be like one example is one of my students has a hard time finding the middle of the face. Well, one of our goals for this winter is going to be, if I line up 5 shots, 3 out of the 5 are going to be in the middle of the face, right? So, once we have those goals, whether they're big or small, that doesn't matter. It's player preference. Then you start to get into the hows. So you have your big goal, and then you have, certain action steps to how are we actually going to accomplish this goal. So in the case of the middle of the face contact, all right, maybe we're going to start with our kind of felt board, and we're going to hit that board, and when you hit the board, the felt kind of comes up the opposite direction, much like you would line your grass when you mow it, right? And and then we see kind of where that contact was being hit. So it's like, okay, if we're gonna do a set of five, we need to get 2 out of 5 to be kind of in the middle, and then it's 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 in the middle of that. Then once we can do that, now we're gonna add a ball with some smaller swings just to kind of feel that the club making contact with the ground and the ball goes in a direction. Then once we can do 3 to 4 of 5 out of that, then we're going to start to increase the length of the swing. And then once we can increase the length of the swing, maybe we're going to have a little bit bigger club. So maybe instead of a wedge, maybe we're going to use a 7 iron, and then a driver where, so the point is, we have this idea of what we're trying to do up here at the top, and all of these steps that we can get that big goal accomplished in, and we're going to have to do all of these little tasks first, and it's a lot more digestible, and you can kind of see your road to that big goal, if that makes sense.
So the big goal, I imagine the big goal is set up by the student, right?
Yeah, totally, always.
And then the small goals, are you guiding them to set up these small goals and doing that? Are they aware of these small goals that you're making for them, or are they trying to come up with it? How does that work?
Yeah, I try to, I have always thought it was nice to include the student in the how process, so I kind of know as a coach what I would do to get them to achieve that big goal. But I like to ask a lot of questions when it comes time to making those small goals. To answer your question, yeah, the student's always going to be involved in the how process. Even if I have to kind of guide them to the answer, they're going to come up with that answer for me because I want them as much as possible part of the process and kind of responsible for their how.
What do you think? What do you think big mistakes are? What should people be avoiding when it comes to setting that goal that they've got?
I think there's really two for me. The first one is I like to have a time to it, but I think sometimes people set the time too short. So okay, I'm a 15 handicap. I want to get down to a 5 handicap, so 10 shots. Okay, great. Well, how much time are you going to allow yourself for that? 1 month. Okay. Well, in order to do that in a month, there are certainly there's more of a time commitment involved in that, right? So, you know, you have to be realistic about, how much time does my schedule allow for me to work at this? Because 10 shots, it could be a lot of short game, it could be a lot of low hanging fruit, but to do that over and over and over again, it's going to take time for you to do. So instead of saying, okay, I want a month, why can't we do a season or a year? Or, for a high school kid, by the time I graduate, I want to be averaging under 80, and right now I'm in the 90s, right? So I think the first one is not allowing enough time for yourself to accomplish the goal. And I think the next one is setting a goal that might be a little too big for where they are right at the moment. I want to hit the ball 300 yards, for example. Well, right now they're hitting it 170 yards. Well, kind of goes into the time part of it, but there's that's not exactly on the track for where you would, or what you can really do with maybe your body. Maybe there's other issues there, right? So maybe setting a little bit too lofty of goal too soon would be my next biggest mistake.
So yeah, that ambitious goal is difficult, right? How do you deal with that? So you have I don't know, maybe you have an 8-year-old come in and say, "Oh, I want to be on the PGA Tour," right? How are you dealing with that? How are you moving them on and giving them recommendations towards that goal?
Well, I think that stems so much from the how part, right? So you look at, what do PGA Tour players do to get to the PGA Tour, right? So where do most of the tour players go to, like college? And did they go from college to the PGA Tour, or did they go college to mini tour, PJ Tour, Canada, Corn Ferry, PJ Tour. Like, so what was their route from college to that? And then you bring it back a little bit more. It's like, okay, well, what did they do pre college in order to get to that college? Did they play in high school? Yeah, probably. Did they play on their varsity team? Yeah, probably. Did they do like AJGA, USGA events? Probably. Okay, so now we're bringing it back to high school. Okay, well let's bring it back to pre-high school. So what does PGA Tour players tend to do pre-high school? Well, in order to get to that level of play in high school, there had to have been something tournament related in their junior golf. So we're very lucky in Wisconsin. I think we have an unbelievably good like junior golf tournament season here in Wisconsin. I think there's, I don't know, probably 6 to 10 events a week for different age groups. It
Right.
seems like. So I have, for example, I have a kid right now that he pretty much played in the Wisconsin junior tournaments for his entire junior career. I don't think he played one AJGA event, but he just got really good with the Wisconsin events, and he kept getting better and better and better. And he had a lot of tournament reps, and he went to play. He's currently at Wisconsin. So I think there's a lot of ways to get from that kind of pre high school to college, right? But you start to kind of keep drawing kind of that goal back farther and farther and farther. So where the kid might be 8 and wants to play on the PGA Tour, now we start to like build a little bit of a roadmap for what he'd have to do. So essentially, that's a really long-winded answer to say we dive into the hows and try to relate it back to the kid as much as possible.
Yes, 100%. Beyond the Scoreboard. Have you read Beyond the Scoreboard by I'm gonna get his name right, Dr. Nick Molinaro?
I have
Have you read
not.
that book yet?
No.
It's a good book. He talks about goal setting. And there's a section in there where he talks about goal setting as the outcome goal, your performance goal, and then that process. And I like to think about that. That really makes a lot of sense of how you kind of set that up. So you have your outcome, right? In the book, he'll talk about shooting free throws, for example. And, if you want to improve your free throw shooting, so what does that look like? What's your performance look like then? So I want to make, 75. Right now I'm at 50% of my free throws. I want to make 75. So now your performance is going to be that practice that you do, right? What's that process? That process is then going to be, well, I have to shoot more. I have to shoot more free throws and I have to practice those free throws. So I'm not going to be done with that until I shoot 20 free throws after practice every day, right? So you break it down into that way. But one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in years is people not being able to get through that process very well. They hit plateaus, they lose the energy, they,
Hmm.
and they just kind of fade off and pretty much forget all about that goal.
Yeah.
How do you keep them engaged with that goal? How do you keep them accountable for that goal? What are some good processes for that, do you think?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So for me, I think it's more of understanding your player's personality. Some players like love like a to-do list, right? And every day you kind of set up, different things for them to do, and it's all on a list, and they complete the list, and they're done with their practice, and they feel great. Some players really do not like to-do lists. They are more like, just give me like a deadline. Well, maybe for one player, I would say, okay, you're going to practice 3 times, just as an example. You're going to practice 3 times this week, and you're going to make 25 4 foot putts in a compass. So five, whatever times around. So 25 4 foot putts. And you're gonna do that 3 times, and at the end of the week you're gonna have 75 putts. Great. That works for the player that loves the to-do list. And then the person that likes more of the deadline, you're gonna say, all right, you can do this as many practice sessions as you need, but by the end of the week, you're going to make 75 4-foot putts. And it could be 10 one day, it could be 60 one day, it could be 5 one day. You're going to balance it how you see fit to keep, however long you can stay engaged, you're going to do it. But at the end of the week, this is your target. Now, is that exactly how it pans out all the time? Maybe, maybe not. But it's kind of a personality thing. So I would also keep them engaged by every, couple weeks or two, change up what they're like the game or the drill. So introduce something new in their practice. So maybe it's 4 foot around one week, and then after a week or two, maybe it's a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 footer around. So now they have to focus in on more than just that 4 footer. And then I would just constantly kind of check in and see how their practice sessions are going, because that'll give you a little bit of a glimpse into, are they engaged, are they kind of losing it, like what's headspace are they in right now. And when I see them start to get into a unengaged headspace, that's when I know I gotta start switching something up for them.
Are there times where you can switch things up and make it a little bit more interesting,
Hmm.
but how frequently are you checking back on the goal that they have to make sure that it's not too difficult or too easy, where they just get complacent with it and either say, "Oh, I can't do this. It's impossible for me to get this done," or "I'm just bored out of my mind because this goal isn't hard enough."
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, for example, we're doing like a high school prep program December through March to get our some kids ready for their season. I would say probably once per month we're just checking in, and it might just be how you feeling about your goal. You're feeling pretty good. Yes, great. It doesn't have to be a hour long check-in, right? You could just kind of check periodically, but I would probably do, I will be doing once a month for those kids.
Yes, I like to check in on that too, because it's so important. If you aren't sticking to your goal, then what's the point? And
Yeah, and if you're not,
it
if
just
you're
gets
also not
challenging.
really putting in the effort, right? Like for example, that high school program, every week, I like to give them homework, which I think is kind of fun. But we only get them once a week, right? All right, in this week, I want to see, I give them their kind of books to track everything, and I want you to give me your book this time next week, and I want to see a couple different practice logs you put in. We talk about just simple things you can put in a practice log, and it doesn't have to be okay. You have to go buy simulator time at XYZ facility. There's plenty of things that they can do at their house for free. It just is an effort thing. So every week, like, hey, like I want to see a couple logs, and if there's 2 or 3 weeks and there's no logs being written down, well, then the conversation becomes, hey, like, remember when we set these certain goals, right? Like, do you think that our progress right now is on track or not on track? And do we think that we need to add in some practice, or do we keep doing the same thing? Well, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result, right? So, those are probably not going to be the most fun conversations, but I think it's part of your job as a coach to keep your players on track.
So, do you see yourself more as a golf coach with that? So, what I'm thinking is, when you talk to your players, and I'm sure you have some players that are really close to you, right? That you kind of took under your wing and you kind of deal with and teach them their golf stuff. How often are you asking them, with these goal setting skills that you're learning through golf, have you noticed them improve your schoolwork? Have you introduced these skills to, you know, other sports that you're playing? Do you ever ask them about that and see how this is relating to their life overall as opposed to just golf? Because I think golf is a little bit more than golf. And if you think about golf that way, like golf is about getting punched in the face, which is a lot like, life is a lot of getting punched in the face.
Totally.
So if you can get back up from those things, I just feel like it's a lot more than just playing golf. And if you can relate these things, and if you ever do relate these things to your student.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't. it's not as direct as that, like, hey, we did a goal setting session in week one of our high school program. Do you set goals in other parts of your life? It might not be as direct as that, but I will say that I do, especially with the high school kids, I do check in with them every week, just in a conversation, just checking in on, how's their school going, and try to get a little bit of a gauge on their responses to those types of questions. A lot of times, at least for high school kids, it's stressed because I got a paper due and two tests this week. And, maybe then the conversation starts to form into something more along the lines that we would have talked about in our goal setting. Like, hey, well, if you have this paper and two tests, how are you managing that? Like, what do you do? It's like, do you wait till the last minute and try to do the paper all in one night, or are you kind of trying to write a paragraph or two a night and it forms into this paper by the end of the week? Like, what are you doing, right? And a lot of times they don't really know the answer to that exactly. I mean, maybe they'll just tell me what I want to hear, but I think that itself opens up the opportunity just to like start the dialogue of how things are going outside of golf, and then you kind of wait for your coaching opportunities from those responses. I like to let them kind of drive the bus a little bit, and then kind of get in there and see if I can provide any golf lessons in real life, I guess.
Well, let's talk about you for a minute, and we'll talk about goals and with you. So in my opinion, your tournament play over the last couple of years has gotten a lot better than when we first met. And I remember the first day, like the first tournament we played together, I don't even think I knew you. We played the Bog, right? It
Yeah,
was years
we did.
ago. And to where you were at that point to where you are now competing at, the PGA championship in for Wisconsin and where you were then, what kind of steps have you taken? What kind of goals have you set for yourself to kind of do that improvement in your golf game? But also you can also bring in your career stuff as well, and where you've taken from your assistant job at Westmore when you were there to now your instruction. Like, how do you set your goals, your personal goals?
Yeah, man, this set me up for another long-winded answer there, Mike. I think for me it's interesting because my golf goals now are so different than my golf goals when you and I first played. So I always based my golf goals off of my final score, and that happened for a long time. And for me, it works for some, and for me, it just didn't. Um, because I knew I could shoot under par. So if I told myself, all right, my goal today is just shoot 70 or better. I mean, there's like, for me, there was just no process. I forgot the process part of that. So, what do I have to do to shoot under 70? And a lot of times it doesn't work out. Sometimes it does, and it's great. But I would say now my goals are more based on what I'm feeling and how I am, like within. So I feel like if I stick to a pre-shot routine, have a clear vision of the shot in my mind, and try to look at outcomes more objectively rather than emotionally and subjectively, those types of small goals equal better golf over here. And I don't have to put the label of, okay, I'm trying to shoot under par today. I think, at least for me personally, it also allowed me to enjoy golf a little bit more, and really adding that into like personal life. It helps you enjoy life a little bit more too. Like, as an example, my wife and I are trying to buy a house, and I don't know if you know this, Mike, but houses are not cheap these days. So,
No.
there's a lot of money that needs to be saved in order to buy said house. So, the end goal is, all right, we need to save X amount of money and then we can buy X house or X priced house. And, that goal is really daunting because it's just really expensive. It's a massive purchase. So, really kind of shrinking it down and maybe saying, instead of, all right, we need to save this much money this month, we say, okay, we're generally, if we go out to eat twice a week this month, we're only going to go out to eat once a week, but another time we're going to do something fun with a dinner. I don't know. I mean, it could be a million things, but like it's allowing yourself to kind of rethink the big goal, at least for me, and break it down into smaller goals. And it's just how you think of, thinking of creative ways to accomplish these little smaller goals on your way to your big goals really helped me out. And it's really helped me out in my golf game because, there was, going back to the tournament play, like there was a time not that far off where I almost just stopped playing in events because I'm like, I can't compete out here. Um, and it was such an issue with more the mindset of playing golf and playing competitive golf. And I just knew I had to change that, and I had to change what I thought was a success and what was a failure, and breaking those goals down and rethinking what a goal would be for me throughout a round has really, really helped.
I like to think of putting, like for what you were talking about there. I really look at putting, right? I can read a putt and I can hit a perfect putt based on my read
Totally.
and miss the putt.
Hmm.
Is that a bad golf shot? You know, like you look at that and you think about that and it's not a bad golf shot. I did everything that I could to make this putt go in. And I had one little error and it didn't go in. It didn't make it a bad golf shot. It was what it was. And changing that mindset just really helped.
Yeah. And then, you could, in terms of, goal setting or achieving a goal for the players that you would coach, it's like, if your target goal or target score was 79, right? So I want to break 80, and you start at 88, 89, so you're looking to drop 9 shots, and you're going about it, and you've played a pretty good round, but maybe you hit one in the water coming down the stretch, and you made double, and you shot 80, and you shot 81. Most people would say, "Oh, that was I kind of failed because I wanted to break 80. I shot 80 or 81." It's like, well, sure, but you probably hit 78 really pretty functional shots, right? And it's like it didn't pan out on that hole in that day, but look where you started, right? You were almost shooting 90, and now you're almost a little upset that you shot 80. So, there's process there. If you think of it more, objectively, like, yeah, sure, like that, the last putt didn't go. Like, to your point, it's like, well, did it not go because you misread it? Did it not go because you hit it too hard? Or maybe did it not go because, I don't know, it hit a blade of grass and kicked it 1 degree here or there on a
Hmm.
10-foot putt and you missed, right? It's like, what was it? And if you don't know, it could have easily just been the last one. So that's not something for you to really get upset about. That's just golf, and essentially that's just life.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I can always name all my bad golf shots, but I have a
Totally.
really difficult time coming up with my good ones.
Yep.
So,
It,
unless
I
they're
I
like
heard this thing.
incredible.
Yeah, I heard this thing once that it almost takes like 3 or 4 positive thoughts to negate one negative thought, and I buy into that. Like it's certainly not a one for one situation.
Absolutely. So I love the fact that we did this goal setting thing now at the end of the year, going into the new year, because I think now is the time to set your goals. Now is the time to create your plan for how you're going to achieve those goals. Do you have anything else that you would like to, one last bit of advice for our listeners out there?
Yeah, I think that as you go into your year, I would say you can have your one big goal, and let you can make that the by the end of the 2025 golf season goal. And then, make a goal for between January 1 and, yeah, most golf courses are going to be going around what, April 15th or so, would you say? So,
Somewhere in
by,
there.
yeah, and then I would come up with a goal of between January 1 and, February, was it 28th this year? Or was it 29th this year? I think it's 28th.
I think 28 this year,
Yeah,
29 last year, I think.
there you go. So you have this like short term goal, and maybe that goal is going to be, I want to, you know, practice or get a good putting session in, twice a week just for the next 2 months, and it's, if you break that down, that's what, 8 sessions, 16 putting sessions over 2 months, totally doable. But make your goals, separate them out into different parts of the year so that they're a little more digestible, but they're always going to kind of relate and build up to that big end of year goal by the end of the 2025 golf season. This is what I want to be, and it might be a score thing, and you know what, it might be a mental golf type thing where it's just like, hey, I want to have, by the end of 2025, I want to just feel better after my round of golf, right? And what can we do between now and then to help me just feel better about my game and better about myself by the end of the year? I mean, it doesn't always have to be score based. Golf is so much more than just the score.
Awesome. Yes, it certainly is. And as my golfing rounds have dwindled, it's more about the people that I'm playing golf with these days. So
Yeah,
um,
love that.
it just changes. But Jason, thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you. It was fun again. Sorry for the long winded
Absolutely.
answers, but sometimes
That's
I get on
okay.
tangents.
That is what we're here for. So, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays
Yeah,
to you. Happy New Year.
thank
And
you. You as
we'll
well.
talk soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, sir.